About the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition and set the stage for our meeting tonight. Who are we? Who is the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition? We are Detroiters. We are advocates. We are community organizations, legal service lawyers, and faith-based organizations who are coming together around our shared values that housing is a human right, and we are working together to establish legislation and an ordinance for the city of Detroit that provides a right to legal counsel for people facing eviction in the city of Detroit. Tonight, you will hear Detroiters share their stories of facing eviction. They are brave and they are bold. It is not easy to share your story and be vulnerable in front of a room full of people. So when people share, show some love in the chat. We share our stories to learn, to take back power, and to help our society do better. We in the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition center our work around the lived experience of people in our community. We will also have researchers in between sharing of stories to present their findings on how this eviction crisis continues to impact and tear away at our community, as well as the economic benefits of passing a right to counsel ordinance or the cost of doing nothing and maintaining the status quo. We will have Q&A following our speakers, and then we are going to ask that you get involved. So this is a listen to action space, so get ready for that. I will be co-hosting this meeting with my partner in good trouble and fellow coalition member, Ms. Gwendolyn Winston, director of the Wisdom Institute. So we'll have a tag team going on with our host here. Now I want to take a moment to welcome our first speaker, Detroit City Council President Mary Sheffield. Mary Sheffield serves as the Detroit City Council person for District 5. Sheffield's demonstrated track record of service and leadership within the community helped her to become the youngest person ever to be elected to the Detroit City Council in November 2013. Now she is the president. So without further ado, let us welcome Detroit City Council President Mary Sheffield.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction and good evening to everyone. Thank you all for taking your time this evening to join us in this very important community conversation. Thank you to the Right to Counsel Coalition for convening this important forum. Your work to protect Detroiters and your partnership in crafting and advocating for Right to Counsel ordinance as well. We appreciate your work. Since my time on the Detroit City Council, I have endeavored to help our most vulnerable residents, with the majority of that work being centered around housing stability and access to quality, affordable housing. This work included establishing the City of Detroit's first ever homeless task force, sponsoring a Save Our Homes rally, which called for a moratorium on tax foreclosures, enacting inclusionary housing legislation, creating a housing trust fund, and challenging the unconstitutional overassessment of Detroit homeowners, just to name a few. As important as these initiatives are, there is no more important effort, I should say, than the pursuit of a right to counsel ordinance, which seeks to provide legal counsel during eviction proceedings for low-income residents and families facing eviction who are at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. When I embarked on this work 4 years ago, nearly 30,000 Detroiters were facing eviction every year. Delving into this issue further, I discovered that at least half of all tenants facing eviction would not lose their case if they had legal representation. Additionally, I learned approximately 97% of tenant landlord cases are initiated by landlords, and almost all landlords have representation, while the vast majority of tenants do not. This resulted in landlords evicting tenants because they have power, not because the law supports their position. In response to that, I began working in conjunction with the United Community Housing Coalition, Michigan Legal Services, and the Right to Counsel Coalition, and other advocates to draft a Right to Counsel ordinance to give income-eligible tenants facing eviction the right to have an attorney during their case. For those who may not understand the gravity of this issue and why it's so important to address it, it's widely known that evictions destroy the fabric of our communities. They drain public resources on many different levels and are fiscally, and more often than not, morally irresponsible. One of the most troubling facts about evictions is that they disproportionately impact households headed by African American women, seniors, and persons with disabilities, and is much more pervasive in communities of color. In fact, nationally, 8% of Latino women and 20% of African American women are evicted each year. That is unacceptable. In the city of Detroit, where African American women are 50% of the population, the tens of thousands of annual evictions makes this problem, in my opinion, a civil rights issue. What's more tragic is that this isn't some new phenomenon. Due to decades of inequality in our housing system, communities of color and low-income women feel the impact of evictions the most. In particular, African American women, who are more than twice as likely to have evictions filed against them compared to whites. With less than half of African Americans and Latinx families owning their homes versus 73% of white families, evictions have a disproportionate negative impact on communities of color. In addition to the clear racial disparities, evictions are inhumane on many levels. They are a major source of anxiety, depression. They pose a threat to the overall mental health of those impacted. Evictions can and have caused family separations. For instance, if an eviction renders a family homeless, some shelters won't allow males and only accept women and children. Children Protective Services have, in some instances, put the children of those evicted in foster care or made them ward of the state due to being inadequately housed. Parents oftentimes have a trouble time maintaining gainful employment due to the lack of transportation and being forced to focus on protecting their family and finding a place to live. Again, in the richest country in the world, this is unacceptable. So I applaud the Right to Counsel Coalition, housing advocates, and more importantly, impacted Detroiters for standing up and joining the fight to pass a Right to Counsel ordinance in Detroit. I want you to know that in me, as your council president, you have a champion in this fight. We are certainly close to the finish line in terms of putting an ordinance before City Council, and your voice and advocacy matters as we strive forward to continuing this partnership and work, which is so vital to the people of Detroit. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, President Sheffield, and thank you for being there since 2019 to advocate for a right to counsel. And yes, we are close. We thank you for your continued partnership, City Council President. Thank you. And now I want to pass the mic to my esteemed colleague, Ms. Gwendolyn Winston.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. I'm Gwen Winston.
Sorry, Gwen, you're muted.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm Gwen Winston, the co-executive director of the Wisdom Institute. And thank you, Councilwoman Sheffield, for your persistence and for centering your work on the people. You know, there are 357,000 women of voting age living in the city of Detroit. And it's so nice to know we have a champion. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge other council members who are present tonight. Council Member Santiago Romero, Council Member Letitia Johnson, Council Member Fred Durhall, Councilwoman Angela Callaway Whitfield, Councilwoman Mary Waters. I'm not sure if there are any other elected officials present. Thank you for taking the time and to be in the room as a listener. That's a very powerful contribution you're making to our city. Thank you. I want to introduce a short video on the Right to Counsel that recognizes and celebrates tenants who have led this movement across the country. The Right to Counsel is a movement, and it began in 2017, 5 years ago, and has spread. And it is the power of the people that we want you to take the time to witness how powerful our voices are. We are so looking forward to a victory signing, as you have just seen, witnessed in the video screen. And with us tonight, we're going to go beyond the numbers. We're going to go to the real lives. We're looking forward to the victory, and we're going to tonight hear the stories, the real live stories of those who have experienced eviction, to hear them share from their heart. And they're courageous women that we have here with us tonight. They're brave because they're sharing what usually folk don't talk about. And I'd like to introduce, first of all, Miss Laree Briscoe, who will share her experiences with you. Miss Briscoe, may we hear
Good
from
evening,
you?
everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laree Briscoe. I am a mother of 5. I rent my home in Detroit on the west side. I moved into my house in 2017. At first, everything was great. It was really nice and it all seemed to be working. However, within a year, things started changing. First, the management companies kept changing. There were different people collecting rent all the time. Then the repairs issue began. The house basically started falling apart. The plumbing started to go. The bathroom consistently leaked. The basement leaked and flooded constantly. I would call the landlord and he would come out and supposedly fix things, but then they would break down again in another 2 months or 2. Basically, they would not do quality work. When I complained, they said I could move, or if I wanted repairs, rent would have to be raised by $100 per month. I agreed more money because I didn't want to move my family around and hope they would make the repairs. During COVID, it got worse. In 2020, I lost my job. My office was downsized. I was collecting unemployment and stayed in constant communication with the management company at all times. The management company told me to apply for SARA for rental assistance. I did everything I was supposed to do, but they would not make the repairs. In the fall of 2020, the hot water tank went out and they refused to fix it. They told me they weren't fixing anything since I owed back rent. Then in the winter, the furnace went out and they refused to fix it because they said I owed back rent. They told me I could fix it and deduct it from my rent, but they would not fix anything up front. They refused to make the repairs even though I had applied for SARA and they knew they were getting their money. I even offered to pay my rent using my unemployment, but they told me no because they would wait for the SARA money. They still wouldn't do my repairs. They cut off my communication from me and filed for an eviction. Thankfully, when I got to court, I got an attorney from Michigan Legal Services. My attorney intervened and ensured they couldn't get all of their money until they made their repairs. So finally, when I had someone fighting for me, they fixed the heat and the hot water and made other repairs, and the eviction was conditionally dismissed. Unfortunately, there are still repair issues going on now. The ceiling was leaking and it's a hole in the living room. The other leaks have started again. The landlord got a lot of money from SARA, and I guess now that he has some money, he is trying to evict me again. I am applying for recertification from SARA, and I am working with another attorney in Michigan Legal Services who will keep fighting this with me. I don't want to move. I've been here for 4 years and it's not easy to find another place I can afford. I'm back to work. I'm doing my part. I just want them to do theirs. I am telling my story tonight because it is important for tenants to know their rights. I understand my rights now, and I know I got taken advantage of by my landlord. Landlords know their rights and the tenants' rights, but the tenants don't know theirs. I would have handled many different things differently if I had known about my rights as a tenant. I'm still fighting. I called the city inspector. They came out and ticketed the home and gave my landlord a ticket. and a notice to fix the repairs of the house. They are threatening to evict me again, but my attorneys are by my side to fight with me if they try it. I just want to encourage everyone to support the right to counsel. Many people are dealing with landlords who don't care, won't repair our homes that we are paying rent for, and taking advantage of people. Thank you for listening to me, and I encourage everyone to do all we can to ensure tenants know our own rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Briscoe. And in the chat, we see so many people are calling you brave, calling you courageous. And
Thank you.
we appreciate your coming tonight to share with us your experiences. You know, and what you said was, when things fall apart, tenants need a lawyer. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Next on our agenda is Dr. Anthony Dunbar, who did a brilliant work over this last year, talking with folks, interviewing folks who had experienced eviction and displacement. And this was a new kind of interview, new kind of way to approach Right to Counsel that is unique to Detroit. And I'd like Dr. Dunbar to share with us the lessons that he's learned, and the lessons that we ought to learn, and the lessons that City Council will be learning through this process. Dr. Dunbar?
I have some slides to share, but I would like to speak just off the energy and inspiration from Ms. Briscoe. I belong to a fraternity called Omega Psi Phi, and we have 4 cardinal principles. It's manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. And it's those last 2 that really touched my heart. The perseverance, the human energy, and then just the love you all threw back to her. Those are difference makers, regardless of if you're looking at the analytical report, which Neil will be sharing with you, or the qualitative perspective that Gwen and I got a chance to work on. It's those human touches that make a difference. Before working in this housing effort, I've also worked in food insecurity areas with local chapters of Feeding America. And I remember one of the advocates who does a lot of the, what's the term when they go to the politicians and lobbying? There's a lot of the advocacy and lobbying for those that were food insecure. And he was saying that he can be armed with all the data and the information, but a lot of times when the positions pivot is when it's accompanied by the humanity of the stories included. So I'll just put that out there as one more tip of the hat of Ms. Briscoe, who are representing a vast number of us, including me at one point in my life. Tanya, were folks able to, have they seen the both reports? Have they been released to folks?
No, so not yet.
All right,
So go ahead and be really, really descriptive.
All right, so let me screen share if that is, let me do that. And some of these will be repeats of if you've been here before, but maybe a little different context because of the way we've shaped this conversation. So let me, I need at least one thumbs up that is clear, is visible, is big enough to be viewed and consumed.
It is. Go ahead, Dr.
right.
Dunbar.
All right, you know, every once in a while we need an amen in the space, so I'll take that as my amen. So a lot of what you're getting the, I'm not sure how to put the relationship of the companion report, but it's it's a second component of a dual conversation. Neil will give you the lead component, and then what you're getting now is the interaction with community. And I'm going to pause because of just my level of respect, and she's my partner. Gwen, before I roll out, first of all, tip of the hat for all the respect and love you have in this community. Before I roll out and talk more about our effort, because part of the trust in the work we were able to do is based on the love and respect folks, not only here, but across the city have for you. So my mama did raise me right. So let me pause if there was anything that you wanted to say before I jumped into the little half academic little thing I'm gonna throw out here.
Yes, I want to say, we're going to hear amens all night long. Thank you.
Fantastic. So inside of the amens, let's talk about the groups that we were able to work with. We reached out to multiple groups, and inside you see many of those who are represented here by some of the leaders, but also folks who were just willing to make an effort. And let's be realistic about this. This research happened in the dead middle of the pandemic, in an area of a lot of uncertainties. And I got to see not only the need for consistent, compassionate perspective of those who needed service, but I also got another point of view, and it was able to pivot my picture for those providing needs, right? And there's a little bit of fatigue on both ends. There's one thing to be in need, but also there's a level of energy to serve need that has to be rejuvenated. And in the midst of a stressful situation with a international pandemic layered on top of it, these folks were able to still persevere through those obstacles. So these conversations, this companion conversation could be had. So many of those leaders are here. You can throw it in the chat, a couple of amens for them. And I'll throw my amen in for Gwen and I. The relationship kind of set the tempo for the way the work was done. Tanya Phillips introduced us to the Stout Corporation, and you'll be hearing from Neil, who led that part of our work. But one of the things that, as I've been a development person and have begun to grow, is that I felt the way the work would be done would be impacted by the way the four of us, as well as Neil's partners, so Gwen, Neil, Samantha Domenico, and Neil and myself, kind of sets the tone of the way the work gets done. And I think the quality of the work also reflects the quality of the relationships between Stout and Gwen Winston Enterprises. As I would also encourage you to think about the way your relationships will move forward, the momentum that's required not only to get the legislation, but the things that follow. The legislation is the opportunity to really do the work. It's not really the work. You working hard to do the work, right? Because it's the enforcement, it's the follow through, it's a lot more that goes with it. But those relationships that you have keep that perpetual energy moving forward. So there were 7 key findings that we pulled out of the qualitative data, and the relationship between our findings mirrors what a lot of the narrative, the historical narrative that Stout provides in this report. And in its report, it talks about the legacy of not only poverty, but structural racism that leads to the poverty that has been catapulted through housing. So structuralism happened on many levels, housing being one of the most vulnerable and impactful. So in that, in red, you'll see that one of the things that needed to be changed, and Ms. Briscoe was a perfect lead in, is that they don't want to pay, or the narrative of not willing to pay, or the inability to pay. There's always an aggravating circumstance or variable attached to that. Very few people want to be insecure in their housing. No one's looking for just pure drama and trauma for the sake of pure drama and trauma. So inside of those, the narrative needs to shift along with the change the legislation will bring. So those primary reasons renters get evicted have some exploitative context, and our interviewees and focus groups members laid that out for us. But Neil was one of the ones as we were talking through some of our findings, that really helped me put and Gwen make sure that that context of that narrative of shifting it of the total responsibility and the accumulating effects of eviction squarely on renters alone. That is the same way critical race theory and other anti-racism things are being dog whistled and are false narrative. This is no less a false narrative within itself. I'm sorry. And then some of the other things that in key findings, again, it's hard to ignore that a lot of this was happening inside of COVID. It's also hard to ignore that, as I've mentioned, the human toll, right? The story behind the trauma. So while Ms. Briscoe told you, gave you a nice overview, she didn't even go into depth, and I'm sure the impact not only on the broader part of her family and her extended family, her children, the other folks who were assisting, it becomes a bubble, and you have enough of those bubbles, it becomes endemic. So that human trauma cannot be ignored. And then what inspired me when days, I had low days, but what inspired me is one of the questions we asked at the end was folks' willingness to organize and participate and activate around this. So there was, I think it was the Detroit People's Platform was one of our first in-person. It had maybe 20 people. Managing that folks and group was intense. And being flexible, some people came a little late, some left a little early, but we were able to capture most of the folks who were that were participating. There was one woman who came about 20 minutes after we started, and then show you the perseverance and the willingness to activate. She literally was coming off the street dealing with a housing circumstance and went right into the focus group. She didn't want to miss the opportunity to share her story and to be involved in anything that might help move these circumstances forward for renters. So when you talk about that perseverance, willing to organize and be activated, that's no small thing. And again, that would be the sustainability to move beyond the starter part of getting the legislation to the enactment and sustainability of it. So what I've done in the top narrative, in the next few slides, I pull sections from the structural conversation and narrative from the from Stout's report, and then layered with it in our report some of the conversations and responses to our inquiries and our questions. One of the things that allowed people to be candid was an assistance from Gwen for us to develop an upfront narrative, or at least sharing a collaboration, better stated, that we would share the questions and how we would be approaching it and our willingness to work with folks in the community. So we had that up front in when we handed out, when we shared the handout, and then the questions that we would ask, at least as the base, and then the follow-up questions, we were trusted enough to go there from there. So inside of this particular conversation, carving poverty as well as renter scenarios, folks understand that we've been fighting poverty for so long. They understand it as an experiential and structurally baked into scenarios, whether it be legislative, whether it be legal, whether it be any other form. They understand the structural aspects of it. And then understanding how Detroit has moved from a homeowner to a renter's environment. Understand that renting is not always the most secure situation. It makes you vulnerable and puts you in those scenarios that Ms. Briscoe brought up. We also had a situation where folks talked about the living conditions and how few protections they had. More specifically, when you have money, you have a voice. So short of having a lawyer, not having the money limits your voice. But providing that bridge and that gap inside of the conversation that was shared with us, allow them to have a voice and will allow folks to have a voice in proceedings. And our participants in the focus group are well aware of that. And again, are willing to participate and activate around it. Backed up and supported legally, it would have felt like I have a voice. Again, folks aren't, one of the other things I was, let me put that in the context that amazed me was that I heard very few feel sorry for myself stories. And I heard a majority of those from Black women who understood their circumstances, but didn't felt a little bit underappreciated for the efforts they were making, not being met halfway. And that when they were clearly trying to let them know that I'm going to do everything I can in my power to work with you, I'm not trying to not give you your money. The cooperation and collaboration on the other end was minimal. However, with a lawyer, as we've just heard, those scenarios begin to shift. I wanted to, again, let's talk about something Ms. Briscoe brought up, the actual conditions inside of some of these scenarios. Again, if we're shifting a narrative from renter blame only, we have to share that, broaden that narrative to all party concerns. So you see in the blue, bug problems, no repairs. They kept my security deposit after they've cleaned the house. So all the things that they were trying to do in an authentic, respecting the agreement part of the relationship, they were still exploited. But when you come with a lawyer, those levels of exploitation seem to decrease. And then there are those scenarios where it impacts, as I was mentioning, the trauma level or your mental well-being, feeling under threat, talking about the eviction process being the worst experience ever. Not having a place to rest your head is one of the leading indicators or triggers for stress. And again, and if you look at the third, it's a recipe for keeping people in a very traumatized state. But after we match some of the conversations up to some of the categories inside of the Stout report, there are also some things that we asked or we were able to pull out of the report as well. For example, we asked Right to Counsel legislation making a difference for the focus group and the interview participants. You can see that when I didn't know my rights, I was vulnerable. When a lawyer was available in my process, the situation got fixed quicker. It was almost like being muted. Can you imagine feeling like you're in a legal proceeding? And then not that we couldn't picture that, because that's literally a Jim Crow image of having your mouth taped while you're under distress in a legal process. Second thing we were able to pull out beyond the direct context from the Stout report, focus group interview participants' willingness to organize. Again, I've mentioned it, but you get to see here, highlighted in blue, among their comments, they're ready to go. And I'm sure as you reach out to more folks, your movement has more power and momentum, potential and capability than you realize. The more you organize, the stronger you'll be. The more persistent you are, the more respect you'll have in return. And then again, in our third point of there's still more to say, the opportunity to focus for the focus group of interviews to provide for the participants to be heard and feel like their experiences matter. There's many folks who go through a situation, but the layered of being able to stick with it or being willing to, if it occurs again, to take the energy to regather yourself has a lot to do with being heard. There's a lot of energy that's expounded being ignored. So in these, you see some of the comments around folks, just the gratitude that they show Gwen and I were floored by the amount of generosity, compassion, and vulnerability that folks were willing to express inside of their experiences. I'm still floored by that today. And I'm teaching a research method to doctoral students this semester. And a lot of them are doing interviews and focus groups. So part of what I just, again, from my personal experience as a researcher outside of academia, I'm letting them know that there's a bigger or broader picture inside of creating narratives based on getting people's story. There is no more generous thing someone can share with you outside of their family or their nucleus family than their story. Always keep that in mind. And Gwen and I always kept that in mind when we were able to engage with folks. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think, I'm not sure if you're going to pivot to Neil. I have a little bit of time before class tonight. So Tanya and Gwen, I hope I were able to elicit your amens in that by being my trusted collaborative colleagues.
Amen. Yes.
Amen for the perpetual energy that goes into this movement. Thank you so much, Dr. Dunbar. I'd like to next introduce another brave, courageous woman. And she'll share her land contract eviction experience. Ms. Charlita Jackson, will you share with us now?
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Charlita Jackson. I am sharing my story this evening to let you know I having legal representations made a difference for my family and me. My family lives in Detroit. My husband and I have 3 children, ages 3, 6, and 7, and we were facing eviction. My husband and I purchased our home on land contract almost 2 years ago. We both lost our jobs last year during COVID and didn't have income coming in. At the same time we lost our jobs, our children had to be homeschooled for almost a year because DPS was virtual most of the year due to COVID. It was hard for me to find employment because I had to watch my kids during the day. We got behind on all of our bills, including our house payment. We couldn't apply for emergency rental assistance because that is not available for land contract. Our seller was not trying to work with us. He did not care about our hardship. He was evicting us. I had to go to court by myself. I was scared, nervous, and terrified. I didn't know what the process was. I didn't know if we were going to be put out and homeless. The thought of your kids being homeless is one of the most terrifying things for a parent. We didn't have anything to fall back on. We put all of our money into our house. Between our down payment and monthly payments of $854, we were over $20,000. We are not wealthy people, and that was literally all we had. I'm thankful when I went to court, I was matched with an attorney from Michigan Legal Services. My attorney negotiated down what the seller said we owed and got my payments manageable again. We're back at work and it's still hard for us. We are still struggling with other things, but at least we can sleep peacefully, knowing we don't have to worry about having a roof over our head. I'm sharing my story because I know other people are going through this. I want people to know you are not alone. We need a right to counsel so nobody has to face eviction and risking losing everything they have. I want other people in this city facing eviction to have the same chance I had to stay in their home. Families like mine are working hard. We deserve to have representation and fair chance to fight for our home. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. I love the ending, and I want to say amen. That's your story. You're sticking to it, and you want other folks to continue and to join this movement because having a lawyer will make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the comments in the chat are applauding you again. for your courageous contribution to our knowing. Your speaking up
Thank you.
makes us feel what's in your heart. And you're not a number. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think, Tanya, you're going to introduce Neil.
And thank you so much again, Ms. Jackson. You are brave, you are strong, you are making us stronger, and we stand with you. So thank you for sharing, and let us all just be encouraged, be inspired. Let us all wrap our arms around each other. I'm a little off script, but thank you, Ms. Jackson. And just know you are not alone, and we are with you. And we will be putting links in the chat tonight on how to reach out for assistance if you need a lawyer, if you need emergency rental assistance, and how to get involved. But we are with you. Keep that love flowing for Ms. Jackson. Thank you so much, community. And now I want to bring up our next speaker, Mr. Neil Steinkamp. Neil Steinkamp is a well-recognized expert and consultant on a broad range of strategic, organizational, and financial issues to government, business, courts, and communities. He has nearly 20 years of experience in this industry, and he has been working on eviction prevention reports throughout the nation. And we are pleased that he's working with us in Detroit and looking at the costs and the benefits of implementing a right to counsel ordinance in the city of Detroit. So I will turn over the mic to Neil Steinkamp to present his research findings as well. Thank you and welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Tanya, and good evening, everyone. Oh, great. I was prepared to run my slides, but this is even better, so thank you. So yes, as Tanya said, my name is Neil Steinkamp. I'm going to spend a few minutes this evening talking more about the numbers and the fiscal impact of eviction and how the right to counsel, to access to a lawyer, can have a positive fiscal impact, an economic impact. It can save the city of Detroit money, essentially. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And the slide's a little cut off on my screen. I'm not sure if that is for everybody. There we go. That'll work. So my name is Neil Steinkamp again. I'm a Michigander by birth, born and raised in Michigan. And for some of you, Michigan State graduate. I worked in our Southeast Michigan office for many years and have only recently relocated to one of our other offices. The work that I have done over the last 5 years or so has been to analyze the costs and benefits associated with an eviction right to counsel in various cities throughout the country. Oftentimes before a right to counsel is implemented, and more recently after a right to counsel is implemented, to look at how it is working, how it really does work. There are a few jurisdictions that have done that. I'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. But I've looked at eviction right to counsel initiatives in Cleveland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, LA, New York City, Delaware, and others. Those reports are all public and available on our website at stout.com if folks are interested. Go ahead to the next slide. Just as we move to that next slide, there are 12 cities and 3 states in the country that have an eviction right to counsel now. That is a phenomenal impact. As Gwen said, over the last 5 years, there's been a really tremendous recognition of this policy change, this legislation, as an important intervention. Right to counsel doesn't solve all of a city's affordable housing challenges. It doesn't fix the entire justice system, but it is a dramatic change in access to justice on so many different levels. As we'll see in the next couple of slides, and go ahead and advance to the next one, it works. There are 3 jurisdictions now. I mentioned there's about 15 across the country that have passed these ordinances, some of them during the pandemic, some of them just before the pandemic. And so there are now 3 jurisdictions that have passed, funded, and implemented the right to counsel. The others are in the early stages of doing that. So we have data from a few jurisdictions to see, how does it work? Is it successful? Does it achieve the kind of housing stability that it seeks to achieve as a form of intervention for those clients who seek out legal representation? And the answer is yes, it's very successful. As you can see here in New York City, which was the first jurisdiction to pass the right to counsel, since its implementation, approximately 86% of tenants have stayed in their homes. We'll see some different metrics from other jurisdictions, also successful, but a little different form of that. New York City is obviously a unique housing market, but martial evictions have declined significantly. Eviction filings themselves have declined significantly, and default judgments have decreased significantly as well. It's really a system change, a justice change, to ensure that tenants have access to lawyers. In San Francisco, again, filings declining 10% in just 1 year after the implementation of their right to counsel. 67% of those in San Francisco who were represented were able to stay in their home. Go ahead to the next slide. We'll talk about Cleveland a little bit. I'm the evaluator for the Cleveland Right to Counsel program. We just issued last week our annual report. If you have a chance to take a look at that, it's got a tremendous amount of data and information for a city that's very similar to Detroit in terms of housing stock and racist housing history and factors such as that. Obviously, it's a different city. Cleveland's not Detroit, but there are some similarities, far more than there are with New York City. And we see in Cleveland, a year and a half into their implementation of a right to counsel, that again, it's very successful. When lawyers are representing tenants, they are able to help achieve the goals and outcomes that the tenants are seeking. So an overwhelming majority of tenants, of course, seek to avoid an eviction judgment. And in Cleveland, 93% of them are able to achieve that. 83% were able to secure rental assistance when that was their goal. Again, very helpful to have a lawyer helping the tenant navigate the rental assistance process. Those are typically situations where the tenant isn't otherwise able to navigate those processes. So to see that 83% of them were able to is very impactful. And I know from the data that most of those 83% weren't even aware that rental assistance was available when they connected with their lawyer. Securing more time to move, a significant proportion of clients didn't want to stay in their home. That wasn't their objective in Cleveland. That wasn't one of their goals. 46% of clients didn't want to stay in their home. For those clients, in 92% of the instances, lawyers are able to effectively negotiate those resolutions so that the tenants have time to move. And time is key. It's helpful to avoid disruptive displacement, the kind of disruption to your life that causes trauma and the need for forms of assistance that the city hopefully would provide, or that otherwise cause harm to you and your family. So very successful in providing time when that's what you're looking for, when you're looking to move. Mitigating damages and securing monetary relief. Again, this is how lawyers are so significantly impacting the resolution of these cases. The 2 last bullet points there for Cleveland, from our estimation, right to counsel clients, disproportionately Black and female. We see that in virtually every city that we work in relative to their overall population. And preliminarily, we estimate significant fiscal benefits, far more than the funding provided to the city in the form of cost savings from different social safety nets, which I'll talk more about as it relates to Detroit here shortly. Let's go to the next slide. A few more just metrics on Cleveland. Dramatic increase in representation. Prior to right to counsel, 1 to 2% of tenants are represented. After right to counsel, 60% of eligible tenants are estimated to be represented. So again, a significant change in how the justice system works. As we heard earlier, in Detroit, very few tenants are represented in their eviction cases. Right to counsel dramatically changes that. 86% of the clients, right to counsel clients in Cleveland, have a complicating factor in their case. And this resonates with many of Dr. Dunbar's comments as well. These are not simple non-payment cases. These are often cases with serious defective conditions, circumstances with their relationship with their landlord, land contracts, rental registries that aren't up to date, all kinds of things that are going on in these cases. They're not simple non-payment cases most of the time. And we saw that overwhelmingly in Cleveland and often hear of that in other jurisdictions. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And one more, I'll keep going. So in Detroit, where it's obviously pre-right to counsel, at least for the moment. I'm hoping that passes soon. But what we were engaged to do is to look at what the potential costs and benefits would be for an eviction right to counsel in Detroit. We centered that work on the lived experience of Detroiters, and that's why our partnership with Gwen and Dr. Dunbar was so critical to our work, to really hear and understand as best we can how Detroiters experience eviction, how a lack of representation impacts their lives. So that helps us to better understand what those fiscal impacts are to the city of Detroit by not enabling there to be representation for low-income tenants facing eviction in Detroit. So centering our work on those lived experiences is incredibly important. As you saw from Dr. Dunbar's presentation, very, very powerful feedback from Detroiters. And again, tonight in the chat, this is an amazing chat, frankly. It's so filled with your voices, and it's extraordinary to see that. Let's go through the next slide. As I mentioned, we partnered with Gwen and Dr. Dunbar. We heard from them earlier. That is a companion to our report, which we hope will be out soon. So you'll be able to see all of the details of both their work and our work. But integrating these two really helped us better understand the potential cost savings in Detroit. Let's go to the next slide. So here's what we talked about already. 4% of tenants being represented in Detroit. That's the line at the bottom. And this is from the 2017, 2018, 2017 time period. You can see at the top landlord representation on a monthly basis up near 83%. For eviction filings in Detroit. So again, a significant disparity between when landlords are being represented and when tenants are represented, and obviously it impacts the outcomes of the work. Let's go to the next one. So we work with legal aid organizations who are providing that legal representation to understand outcomes and dispositions of cases and things like that. And we focus on outcomes of cases that are where we would see disruptive displacement. That is the type of displacement that can lead to trauma for the individuals experiencing it. Very short requirements to move out of your home and significant risk to the families that are involved. So by our estimate, represented tenants are nearly 18 times more likely to avoid that than not represented tenants. We think that with an effectively implemented right to counsel in Detroit, 6,400 renter households a year may avoid that kind of disruptive displacement. 6,400 renter households that are experiencing that kind of disruptive displacement every year now, close to 20,000 Detroiters based on household size. A right to counsel helps avoid that, not for everyone, not for every eviction filing, but as we work through the models and the analyses, we think that a significant portion of renters facing eviction in Detroit would be able to avoid that kind of disruptive displacement and trauma through effective legal representation. What we'll see in the next couple of slides is a unique element that we saw in Detroit, which is the impact that eviction has on out-migration, or people leaving the city of Detroit. Through the eviction process, they no longer have anywhere to go. There's no safe and stable housing for them or their families, and they're forced to leave the city, either out to other areas of Michigan or outside Michigan altogether. And we saw that both in the feedback from the sessions that Gwen and Dr. Dunbar had, as well as some research and data that we've collected from elsewhere. So here there was a study that was done by a researcher out of Toronto, I believe, looked at Detroit evictions, focused on a relatively small sample, but really tried to identify what was happening with a particular group who were experiencing the eviction process. And she found that about 22% of the people that she was interviewing facing eviction ended up leaving the city of Detroit. We go to the next slide. We tried to get a little bit closer, put a few more data points together as best we could. We looked at some sampling of eviction filings in Detroit. and then looked at whether or not it looked like people had left the city following those eviction filings. Of course, we weren't able to interview each of those people, but a significant number of those people in our initial sample did appear to have left the city of Detroit following that eviction filing. Again, we've got some sort of correlation and causation there. We want to make sure that we're being clear in the estimates, but again, a significant portion of people leaving the city. And we obviously all know that the city's population has declined pretty significantly as well. You've got 30,000 eviction filings a year. That affects close to 90,000 people per year in the city of Detroit for a city with only 600,000 people. It's extraordinary. Let's go to the next slide. In Cleveland, we ask clients what they would do if they were evicted, if they weren't represented. About 6% of clients indicate affirmatively that they would absolutely have to leave the city. Many more indicate that they just have no idea where they would go. A portion of that group would likely end up leaving the city if they were evicted. So we know that outmigration is a factor in Detroit. We know that there's an economic impact from population loss. So that was certainly a contributor to our analysis. Not the only contributor, but unique in Detroit because of oftentimes how little social services may be available to help stabilize renter households that are facing that kind of trauma and insecurity. Let's go to the next slide. So here's our conclusions in terms of a fully implemented right to counsel and what the cost savings may look like. I say may because it's an estimate. It depends on a lot of factors in terms of how a right to counsel would be implemented. But we estimate close to $60 million in savings, and it would come in a lot of different forms. Some of that will be as a result of economic impact from outmigration, as I was just talking about. Some of it is related to funding for the school systems, other social safety nets, Medicaid healthcare costs, foster care costs. And again, how those end up manifesting themselves may actually be different. It may be that the outmigration is less and the social service cost is more. But we're confident that overall, this is the order of magnitude that is reasonable to expect in terms of economic impact and potential fiscal savings for the city of Detroit. This would be far greater than the potential cost of an eviction right to counsel in Detroit. Let's go to the next slide. This is just a pie chart showing visually what that looks like. All of this will be very, very detailed in our report. When you see the full report, you'll have all of the background and detail and research for those who are interested. Let's go to the next slide. It's also important to appreciate that our analyses really understate the potential impact. We quantify what we think is reasonable and credible using the best available information that we have. None of it is perfect. All of it is an estimate, but we think it's reasonable based on the various metrics and feedback that we receive. But there are lots of forms of trauma that Detroiters experience when going through the eviction process that are very difficult to quantify. Things like costs associated with the juvenile justice system, child welfare costs, the impact on unstable employment, tax benefits from consumer spending, the negative impacts of just having an eviction on your credit and the ability to re-rent, which is a very serious issue as well. Just the knowing that landlords will see whether you have an eviction filing and then not rent to you limits the ability for people to re-rent in safe and stable housing. Public benefits, the cost to neighborhood insecurity and instability. There are so many other forms of economic impact that arise from the magnitude of evictions that Detroit is facing. The neighborhood instability and the costs that arise from that are significant, but very difficult to quantify specifically. So we have quantified what we think we can, and it is far more than it would cost to provide the lawyers to offer these services. But we know that even that is an understatement relative to the true impact of eviction for the city of Detroit. Let's go to the next slide. We've also done these studies in other cities, and those reports again are public and on our website. We find pretty consistently a return on investment in the $3 or 300% range. Philadelphia being an outlier. Oftentimes, there's also benefits that would accrue to the states. So there's fiscal benefits to the state of Michigan in addition to the city of Detroit. We've measured those for the city of Detroit, but certainly the state of Michigan would benefit from fewer Detroiters facing that kind of housing instability as well. So not unrealistic to expect that Detroit would recognize a return on investment similar to, if not greater than, what we see here. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Tanya, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for sharing those research findings. And that's speaking to my heart. That's telling me there is absolutely no reason to not move forward with a right to counsel ordinance for Detroiters. So thank you for sharing your report. We look forward to the full release. And us in community, we're going to continue to mobilize around this information that's being shared today. So thank you so much. And if you could hang on a bit for Q&A, we appreciate that too. And now I want to bring up our next speaker, Ms. Tanisa Sanders, otherwise known as T. Tanisa is a Detroit Action Housing organizer. In 2009, Tanisa was introduced to Detroit Action by a neighborhood friend that worked at a gas station. She decided to attend a meeting with the understanding that she was getting a home. When Tanisa sat at this community meeting, she realized that it was a grassroots, community-based organization. Tanisa was very intrigued with community outreach, started off as a part-time member, and then went on to volunteer on several committees, which gave her the knowledge and expertise to pursue the following positions of chapter president, executive president, and many more. Through hard work and perseverance, Tanisa is now an organizer. Tanisa would like to build a base with community members that are open to educate, relate, motivate, and engage other community members and build power, community impact, and share values that align with city, state, federal, and national policies. It has just been a joy working with Tanisa and the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition. And she's just one who brings joy into the room. I'm always inspired by her humor and her activism. I can't say enough good things about T. So without further ado, Ms. Tanisa Sanders. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanisha Sanders. I go by T. I am a renters and tenant organizer with Detroit Action, but first and foremost, I am a new citizen in District 1 up under Pro Tem President James Tate. And I just came in November, so I'm just getting to know over here. But my small story is back in 1998 was the only time that I faced eviction. And it was because my landlord was very slow with doing repairs. But what stood out to me with that situation is that I was at the podium by myself and he had legal representation, which even though it was him not making repairs, it was, I put my money in escrow and he just wanted to say, hey, I wanted to know if you had spunk enough to do this. So if all landlords are doing it, that's really sad. Now moving up to 2022, 2021 from October to November, I did door knock for United Community Housing Coalition, and I did hit about me and my crew hit about 350 doors, and we really spoke to citizens, and citizens were like, you know, it should be a right to counsel because we always left up at the podium with the landlord having representation, and they didn't. So that ended around in November, the end of November, 1st of December, but I did also go into a phone banking for all 7 districts. And with the 7 districts, we were able to make $100 a day. We are hearing that renters really getting displaced. They became basically homeless. Homeowners are being renters, and children are being displaced, and seniors are being displaced by the droves. And it's very sad. A right to counsel is needed to really be implemented not only in Detroit, but in Michigan, because people are hurting out here. And the help just don't stop at renters and tenants. The help should be with, again, homeowners, lease to own, or land contract people, like Ms. Briscoe got displaced, unfortunately, renters. And now we have a new bunch of people that's called border renters, which their families are renting out rooms, but sharing one bathroom and the cooking area. Families also are called couch hopping, or what you would call, I have to call a friend to see if me and my children can lay on their floor for the night. And with right to counsel, that wouldn't be what our citizens would be going through. in hand with my organization, which is Detroit Action, we do have first Tuesdays, we have renters and tenants meetings so we can discuss things to talk about for the Right to Counsel and also Renters Bill of Rights. And also, we have a total housing committee meeting every third Tuesday. But Fridays, but the fourth Friday, Tuesdays, we actually meet with a federal team, and we are trying to make changes on the federal level also. A Right to Counsel is needed, and definitely a Renters Bill of Rights. So I want to tell you thank you this evening for talking to me. And if you want to reach out to me, just look up Tenesa, TENESA at DetroitAction.org, and we definitely can talk about things. And I appreciate you having me on today. And Right to Counsel is what we needed. Thanks.
Thank you so much, T. Thank you for hopping on and sharing a little bit about your story and background, and always reminding us about continuing to do the work and the intersectional pieces of these campaigns. So thank you so much, T. Now I want to bring on our final speaker for the evening, our final presentation speaker. Just a second. Dr. Shawnita Seeley Jefferson. Dr. Seeley Jefferson is a social epidemiologist whose primary research seeks action to combat manifestations of structural racism that limit the human rights of Black families and communities. Dr. Seeley Jefferson is the founder, director, and principal investigator of the Social Epidemiology to Eliminate Disparities Lab, acronym SEED. The mission of the SEED Lab is to conduct high-quality epidemiology research to find solutions that disproportionately to the disproportionate burden of infant mortality among Black women. To that end, Dr. Seeley Jefferson is the principal investigator of the Social Epidemiology to Combat Unjust Residential Evictions, acronym SECURE, study founded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in partnership with the Community Advisory Board of Black Women Leaders. The SECURE study will document for the first time the magnitude and severity of court-ordered and illegal residential evictions, as well as their impact on the health of Black families in the Metro Detroit area. Dr. Seeley Jefferson is a native Detroiter. She lives in Detroit, and it's just been such a pleasure getting to know you, Dr. Jefferson, Seeley Jefferson, and we are so excited about your research telling our story here in the city of Detroit. So I am honored to pass the mic to you to share about your research, Dr. Seeley Jefferson.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. So I don't think I have permission to share my screen.
1 second, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, doctor, can you try now?
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, so again, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of my points. Our esteemed panelists have already shared, but I just want to talk about court-ordered and illegal evictions. So we know that court-ordered evictions are an important determinant of health. We know that 2.3 million low-income renters per year are evicted. We know that poor women of color have the highest risk of eviction. Specifically, Black women with children are more likely to be evicted than all other groups. And the sociologists who pioneered the study of evictions in society said that eviction is to Black women what mass incarceration is to Black men. Mm. Both of these are a cause, and both of these are a consequence of poverty. So we know that Black mothers, as well as those who are victims of domestic and interpersonal violence, bear the greatest burden of court-ordered evictions. And this suggests racial, family, and gender discrimination by landlords. We don't have any data on illegal eviction. So any eviction that does not go through the court is illegal. So sometimes people refer to these as informal evictions, but I'm a proponent of calling a thing and calling it what it is, which is illegal. We know that these types of evictions account for about 50% of all evictions, and we don't have any data on the impact of this violent source of housing instability on the health of the people most affected. And we know that evictions over time in Michigan compared to the United States are higher. Michigan eviction rates are higher than they are in the United States overall, and that's what this figure is showing you, eviction rates over time from the year 2000 to the year 2016. So I was interested in the impact of living in a neighborhood that had high eviction rates and how they were related to preterm birth in Black women, and whether or not living with or being married to the father of the baby was a significant modifier of this relationship. So what I found in this work is that the eviction judgment rate for Michigan and the Tri-County areas, so Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, these areas that our study participants lived in were consistently higher than the rates overall in the United States and in the counties that they lived in and in the state of Michigan from the year 2009 to 2011. Interestingly, the neighborhood eviction filing rates were correlated with most strongly with neighborhood percent of African-American residents, as well as neighborhood female-headed households. So this means that women who lived in neighborhoods that were, mostly headed by a single parents, and those that were disproportionately African-American had higher eviction filing rates. What we found in the data were that the range of evictions in the neighborhoods that our study participants lived in ranged from 0 to 78 eviction judgments per 100 renter-occupied homes. And eviction filing rates in the neighborhoods that our study participants lived in range from 0 to 132 eviction filings per year per 100 renter-occupied homes. So this means some of the houses in the neighborhoods that our study participants lived in had evictions filed against them more than once in a 12-year period. When we looked at the relationship between living in a neighborhood with high eviction filings and high eviction judgments, we didn't see a significant association with preterm birth in Black women, but we found that this relationship was different depending on if the women were married or living with the father of their baby. So we found that if women lived in neighborhoods with high eviction filings and high eviction judgment, and they were living with or married to the father of their babies, they had significantly higher preterm birth rates. These findings of a correlation between eviction filing rates and percent of African-American residents and percent of female-headed households is consistent with the literature that shows that African-American women with children have an elevated risk of housing discrimination and formal eviction. So in other words, women who live in neighborhoods with high eviction rates have higher risk of eviction, not necessarily because of their own failure to pay rent, but rather this is possibly the result of anti-Black racism from landlords and or the normalization of residential evictions in these areas. So our findings document the burden and severity of the housing crisis. We also point to the urgency of action toward eliminating manifestations of structural anti-Black racism and highlight the interconnectedness and multi-level impact of systems of oppression on the health of Black communities. So this prior study led the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to invest nearly $1 million in my vision for a research project. And actually they asked me, what project would you want to do if you had unlimited resources? And I said, I would study evictions in my hometown. And they invested without any hesitation, $1 million into the social epidemiology to combat unjust residential eviction study. This research study is a mixed method, community-based participatory research project for action. I'm not interested, and I'm an academic, but I'm not interested in doing research for the sake of intellectual curiosity when people in my community are really facing crimes against humanity. The magnitude and severity of evictions and their impact on Black women, our families, and our communities is the focus of SECURE study. We have a community advisory board of Black women stakeholders from various sectors of our society and community-based organizations. And I'm funding Black women consultants to co-create and co-lead the work. So we have a $1 million grant. We're in year 2 of a 3-year project. And 71% of the budget of this $1 million grant is going from my institution into the training of my students, funding this community advisory board, paying Black women consultants and community members who will share their stories with us. So we have 2 projects, one focused on court-ordered eviction, and I'm using data from a prior study and linking the addresses from that prior study to data from the eviction lab. So I'll be able to quantify the impact of court-ordered evictions at the neighborhood level over time and how those are related to maternal and infant outcomes in Black women. And then I'm doing focus groups in the Tri-County area so that I can get women's stories. So we're getting empirical evidence as well as the qualitative evidence, which is the stories, which are important to sort of compel action. And then the second study is focused on illegal evictions, which we don't have any data on. And I'm fielding a survey right now. My goal is to have 1,600 Black women complete this survey. So there's a saying, no data, no problem. And we absolutely have a problem. So Secure Study is trying to get the data that will be needed for us to demand that landlords, elected officials, that policymakers, that people who can make a decision will protect Black women and our families. And then we're doing in-depth interviews with Black women who have experienced illegal evictions so that we can get the stories around these experiences. So I just want to briefly share, we are in data collection mode. The data have absolutely not been analyzed, but I'm doing a lot of the community outreach and engagement. In our focus groups, themes are emerging even as we're just beginning, that living in neighborhoods where you see your neighbors evicted is very stressful. These have negative mental health impacts. They destabilize communities. There's a lot of stigma around evictions and seeing people being evicted. And even when I was initially recruiting for Secure Study, I had to take eviction off of the recruitment materials because there's such a stigma around eviction. And then I talked to a study participant and she told me that she had an eviction judgment against her, and the court gave her a little bit of time to move. And then according to her, the next day after court, her landlord sent some goons to her house, threatening her and her family, and she just left. So I imagine if this study participant had representation, her landlord would not have sent some goons to her house to force her and her family out before the court made her move. So with that, I will stop my share. I absolutely want to acknowledge the Black women who share their stories with us for the sake of finding solutions to a lot of the problems that we are burdened by, and our funders. And there's the Secure Study website and the email address. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, please do that. I say a lot of things on Twitter. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seeley Jefferson, for your work and your research and making sure we are both seen and heard in terms of this eviction crisis. Thank you so much, Dr. Jefferson. So now we want to bring back Neil Steinkamp and move into a Q&A. If you have a question for the panelists or Right to Counsel Coalition, we'll take a few questions and try not to have you on for the rest of the evening, but we'll take about 10 minutes of questions. We can see some in the chat. If you have questions, then put them in the chat. We can try to see hands, but there's a lot of individuals on the call, so we might not see everybody's hand. So if you can't put in the chat, that's a little bit easier, but we'll do our best. So if we can bring Mr. Steinkamp back up. Dr. Dunbar had to go teach class this evening, but if you have questions for our panelists or just something you want to say in general, let's take about 10 minutes or so and move right into it. Let me see.
There are questions in the Q&A.
Okay, let's see if one was directly addressed to our panelists, or maybe we'll just go in order. Let's see, I don't believe President Sheffield is still in the meeting. Is there a time when Right to Counsel ordinance will be introduced? We don't know, but we hope very, very soon. And if you're registered for this meeting, and we will be sharing the recording of this meeting, keep in touch with us as soon as we know, then you know. I do see a hand, I think from Councilwoman Angela Callaway.
Yes.
Councilwoman.
Good evening, everyone. And when that ordinance is introduced to the council, I'll be one of the first council members to support it with a vote yay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Angela Callaway. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, it's good to have council members in the meeting who are listening. Thank you, listening and supporting. So, going down here. Poverty is a root cause of evictions. Beyond eviction defense, what innovative programs can the city put in place to help impoverished residents? How can we help fellow Detroiters get out of poverty? Well, it's a lot there. So, Mr. David Sanchez, I did see a lot of people commenting on various things in the chat, but why don't I open it up to our panel members first? Does anybody want to tackle that one?
Tanya, I'm not sure if I can tackle that one. It's a great point, and there's a lot that can be done, should be done, needs to be thought about in terms of reducing poverty in the city of Detroit and elsewhere in this country. It's not something that I've sort of feel qualified to here tonight say, here's how we're going to reduce poverty in the city of Detroit. But we can't miss the intersection between poverty and eviction. When we look at the frequency of eviction filings, there are very, very few eviction filings for people of great means. Evictions are disproportionately affecting, of course, people living in poverty. And so as we think about interventions like a right to counsel, which is one, it's an intervention involving a legal proceeding, right? Poverty itself is not necessarily a legal proceeding. So right to counsel is a very important intervention for those circumstances. But there is much more to think about, both in terms of addressing poverty and in terms of providing affordable housing resources as well, which is a bigger picture question also. So it's a fantastic question, but I think we would take the rest of the evening to answer it, or to even try to answer it.
Probably so. There's lots of work to do. And our chat is active, but I want to highlight Councilwoman Gabriela Santiago Romero in the chat. Yes, working with RTC since her days as an organizer. Also committed and excited to make it happen. Thank you, Councilwoman.
I am,
Yes.
and thank you all for this work. I am just excited. I miss the grassroots, but it's really beautiful to see the education, the storytelling, the engagements. And as always, our office and myself is committed to making this work. Hi, Evan. Hi, friends that have been pushing this for so long already. It's just so beautiful to see how many folks are here, the mission just growing. And I just can't wait to be the next city that makes this happen. So thank y'all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
And I want to give a shout out and thanks to the councilwoman, because without her giving me my first training in organizing, she trained me the power person I am. Thank you, Gabby.
I love you, T. Thank you.
Right. Going down the line, wondering when the stout report will be available.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in there, Tanya, that are kind of right down the fairway for me. I'll address that one and one more. The best I can tell you on when the stout report will be available is soon, I think. I don't have a specific day, but I do understand it to be soon. And that's probably the closest that I can get. In terms of I think there's another question there in terms of what is the initial funding amount. You'll see that in the report. You'll see a number in our report. We're still thinking through that, but it really depends on how the program is structured at the city level, right? So there's one thing that we can contemplate for us. What's more important usually in our studies is the ratio of investment to benefits. Because a program can be scaled a lot of different ways. It can be scaled over time in terms of implementation time horizons, eligibility requirements, things like that. So those can all affect how much it could cost. But what we find is that regardless of how you land on that, providing representation to tenants is going to be a net positive from a fiscal perspective. So you'll see a number in our report, but there's a lot of other numbers that it could be. It just depends on how the city sort of thinks through the program.
Thank you for answering that, Neil. And I guess I just want to chime in from the coalition's perspective. You know, it just needs to happen. You know, there's a cost to taking action. There's a cost to not taking action, you know, and you know, we have to think about the human costs. We have to think about the fiscal costs. And I know a lot of us on this meeting can relate as lifelong Detroit residents who've seen our neighborhoods deteriorate, who've seen our mothers, our neighbors leave. You know, a lot of the young people and families, you know, are seasonal. You know, every summer you see new families moving and coming and going because of these waves of eviction coming and just washing, you know, our residents and families aside. So that's me on my soapbox, but I just wanted to add we have to make it happen. We do. Let me get off my soapbox and come back to the questions. And panelists certainly unmute, you know, whenever you want to. What about volunteering? I like to volunteer. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Awesome. So if you want to volunteer, because this is not a club, it's a movement, come on and join. I just put some information in the chat or in the Q&A piece. We have a little volunteer form, a Google form you can fill out. You can text us. And then afterwards, since you shared your email, we'll send you a message and ask, you know, if you want to volunteer. So thank you so much. Other questions? Are the vast majority of landlord corporations owning blocks of houses? Does the city own houses that are evicting Detroit citizens? Anyone that one?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the answer to either of those, frankly, for a few reasons. One is more recent data sets in terms of eviction filings in Detroit are very hard to get your hands on. So our work is looking at 2019 data. And so there are some limitations there. In addition, the names of entities that file evictions from a plaintiff's perspective or a landlord perspective don't always tell you sort of who owns the home when you look at it in the docket records. So you could create lots of LLCs. It could be the same person, same landlord, but they could have 50 different LLCs owning different houses. So that is a very, very difficult analysis to do, not one that we have done. So I would have to defer to folks on the ground in terms of what their anecdotal experience is trying to wrestle with those questions.
Well, it's difficult to wrestle with, certainly. There needs to be more research on who owns these properties. Yes, there are a lot of corporate landlords who file in bulk. There are a lot, you know, and there are a lot of smaller landlords. I don't have that information where I could share a specific number. I believe University of Michigan Poverty Solutions may be looking into that I don't know if anyone is in the meeting from University of Michigan Poverty Solutions. So I don't know the answer to that question, but just from my experience, it's a little of all, you know, the big ones, the small ones. And sometimes, yes, you know, we've even seen some cases with the land bank authorities, unfortunately. So it's a big problem, but I don't know the definitive answer to that question. How do we sign up to receive these reports? As soon as we have it, we will share the link. Are we collecting data in Detroit on illegal evictions? Dr. Seeley Jefferson.
Yes, that's a big part of Secure Study. And I'm fielding a survey right now asking people about their experiences with this. So we don't have any data on the impact of illegal evictions on families. And so hopefully we will have so I'm gonna have 1,600 Black women complete this survey, and then I'll be able to say out of the 1,600, what percentage experience an illegal eviction, and then I can connect it to poor mental and physical health outcomes in the women and the communities and their families. So that's the goal of Secure Study, to get some evidence.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe this may be a question for both Dr. Seeley Jefferson and Mr. Steinkamp. Have either of you ever included a question on your surveys regarding who and where to go if they need legal assistance?
Dr. Seeley Jefferson, I'll defer to you on that one first, and I can talk a little bit about some work I've done that's sort of tangential to that question.
Mm-hmm. So in our survey, we don't ask that specifically, but in our focus groups, because we're interested in the focus groups about what it's like living in a neighborhood where you see people evicted. So we asked about community resources that people know about that may be assisting folks with, you know, housing and other, you know, basic human needs, so, you know, basic needs that people have. So we sort of get at that in the community level piece of the study, but we aren't asking specifically about that. But on our website, Secure Study website, we have resources for people who, you know, might be facing eviction, or people who are interested in, you know, getting resources that can help them or their families with this housing instability problem.
Yeah, I would just add that it's a great question, and one that I hope through the implementation of a right to counsel, it's one that City Council has a chance to think about, and the providers of legal services are I know they'll be thinking about, is how do we reach out to our communities and let them know about this right. I have seen in other communities that it's a really important thing. The justice system has not worked for a lot of people for a very long time. And to now say, oh, the justice system is going to work for you all of a sudden doesn't always come with a resounding appreciation for that. And so we need to be thinking about how to engage our communities through trusted voices in their communities, really thinking about organizing, the importance of organizing, the importance of our community-based organizations, and how critical they're going to be in sharing that information. Because what you will often find is the answer to that question is that people don't know. People don't know where to go. And that's even true when you send them a letter in the mail. If you are able to get eviction records from the courts and you have the addresses, you can send them a letter and say, hey, there's free eviction legal help that's available. And I've seen cities do that. And even then, many people don't respond to that, or don't, you know, they respond. There's a lot of mail that folks get that say that there are free things, and those are not free things. And so there's plenty of scams that are out there. There's a lot of skepticism. And so again, we really need to be thinking about effective communication strategies through trusted messengers in our communities. And I know obviously the folks on this call in Detroit know who those trusted messengers are and how to amplify that message when it's one that can be shared.
Absolutely, and that's why we're a broad and diverse coalition. And I see we're getting a little close to our time, so we're not going to be able to answer every single question for this meeting, but we will save the chat, and we will share these resources far and wide, after this recording. So right now, just for the sake of time, I want to pass it to my sister, Gwen Winston.
I'd like to raise a response by Ruth Johnson. When you talk about trusted messengers, I want you, everyone on the call, to be reminded that we have trusted messengers. One particular organization that's participating with us is the Community Development Advocates of Detroit. And we want to remind you that there are some righteous CDCs in the city of Detroit who are very concerned about evictions, and who are our trusted messengers, and who are getting information out to our community. So we don't want to forget that all the landlords are not the terrible people. There are landlords who are working to build housing, to build safe housing, and to keep us whole. So don't forget the community development corporations in the city of Detroit. I also want to ask you do you now know which elected official has the power to adopt the right to counsel? I think you now know it's the Detroit City Council. And I think we have a slide for that, for you to get information. We want you to think about which council we want you to think about, and call your council members, because we want to know, we know that you have the power to pass the right to counsel. One of the questions that I don't hear, not the statements I do not hear often, do you have the will to pass the right to counsel? Because you will be bombarded with a capitalist construct about this issue. And back in the day, and I guess it's today, Black women have said, where there's a will, there's a way. And so we're looking for that willingness to be demonstrated by city council. And we will only know that when you start calling council members and asking some questions and saying what's on your mind about the right to counsel, the right to have a lawyer. And we have posted council members' contact information. There is a website address that you can take down, make note of for yourself. And if you live in these districts, you will note that if you know what district you live in, then you know which council member represents you. And I believe we'll make these slides available to folks at this conference, at this forum, at this meeting. And I believe we're also streaming on Facebook. We're not today? Okay.
No, but we will post and share afterwards.
Okay. So you will be able to access this information. So we have a call to action, which is the next thing. Many of you have asked, where can we get information? So you can text DRTC, and you see the telephone number, the text number, 833-258-4698, or you can go online. What we want you to do, this is a call to action. We want you to share the information that you heard tonight with your community. We're looking for you to make phone calls. And we're always good to put the word out there when it's time to make the phone calls, because this is about strategic action. There are budget hearings, there are all kinds of hearings. Show up and make a comment. Most times you're given 1 minute to give a statement. So be prepared to give a succinct, powerful statement. We will be asking you to sign letters of support. we were asking you to share your experiences. We're going to have a storytelling and story banking platform. So when you tell your story, we're going to save it. We're going to bank it and tell it throughout this whole process, this perpetual process. And then we want you to join the coalition. Please join the coalition. This is a tenant movement. This is a renters movement. And we intend to listen and to do and to take action based on your experiences. Because as you heard from all of these reports, we want to know. And we will be and you will be the one with the voice. Spread the word. Go to our Facebook page. We have a petition. Well, at the end of the month, I sure hope that we will have 1,000 signatures based on the energy that you have in this room tonight. By the end of February, can we get 1,000 signatures? Will you commit to that? Please. And if you're facing eviction, or you're behind in your utilities, or you need internet services, get a lawyer and help with payment assistance. There's a number for you. There's a Detroit Eviction Help. There is this number, 866-313-2520. And of course, report all your bad conditions in your rental to the City of Detroit Building Safety and Engineering, 313-224-2733, or this link that's in here. And don't take no for an answer. Don't take I don't know for an answer. Don't take I will get back with you for your final answer. It's persistence. Persistence, as our sisters have said to you. It's persistence. And homeowners, we have some righteous homeowners. Get property tax help. Call the Detroit Taxpayer Service Center at 313-224-3560. And if you're experiencing homelessness, there's a number for you also, 313-305-0311 or 0211. We are the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition, calling for action every day. And there's one thing everyone on this call can do. And I think we're on to our next word, the last word, the final word.
The final word this evening. Thank you, Sister Gwen. As we come to a close, we've been together almost 2 hours now. I think about the phrase, this is not a moment. This is a movement. And there's a place for everyone to get involved. This is not an activity, but when we pass a Right to Counsel ordinance with the support of our council, Detroit City Council members, with the support and advocacy of our community members, we will change the quality of life and uplift our community here in the city of Detroit. So we invite everyone, encourage everyone to take an action to join this movement. Let's make this our year. Let's make this our quarter, right? To pass a Right to Counsel in the city of Detroit. Thank you so much. We will share this recording and we'll lock hands, we'll lock arms in this movement and keep working together. I wish everyone peace and blessings and a wonderful evening. Thank you very much and good night.